Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. Today we are fully live and I have Killian on here today who's going to walk us through a little bit about the recent attack you guys might have heard about in the news that's being called Hafnium. Killian, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Kody. Thanks for having me on again. It's like we're regulars doing this now anymore.
Right, and of
Pretty
course
good stuff.
we're also scheduled to be doing an upcoming Nullbyte stream. So if any of you caught the last one, it was super popular. We had lots of great interaction, and it looks like we're going to do another one on the 17th. So I'm also really looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is it's been a big week and not in like a good way. It's been a scary week, honestly. I know, Kody, you and I had talked about this last week, and on a couple of our streams, we talked about the zero-day exploit in Exchange, or actually 4 of them, to be honest. And, I had read about them over the weekend, and, they found it, they had the patches out, and it seems like it just went nuts between last Thursday or so, and this week we've seen it. And the interesting thing is, I believe they started to piece together some of the timeline. I think Brian Krebs did a great article about it, where it sounds like as they started looking into this, they've seen examples of compromise going back to, I think, even January or maybe even late December at this point. So this has been going on for a long time. And now that I think it's been discovered, we're facing, I think a conservative estimate might be about 30,000 compromised on-prem Exchange servers. And it covers, I think, pretty much all of the versions. Exchange Online is okay, but I think most or all of the on-prem versions are susceptible to one or more of these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so like listening in on security Twitter over the weekend, there was a point where I was just like, I was with my friends, I was like, I have to go check my work email. Like, this is like a real attack that like people are freaking out about, because it was wild to hear that. First, like, we heard there was a problem that was very serious and was being exploited in specific cases. But then, when it became widely known that this was a problem and people started patching, whoever either was behind this or was wanting to take advantage of this kicked things up into high gear and started automatically exploiting every single box that was vulnerable to this on the entire internet. So doing something like using Shodan, they were able to put together a list of where all these vulnerable servers were. And instead of doing their meticulous, low and slow campaign that they were doing before they were caught, it seems like the actor behind this realized that it was either all in or nothing and decided to go all in, which is a very, like, it's a kind of a larger geopolitical thing. It's very, very kind of like a ballsy move to go in and do this, like when people can kind of like figure out who you are. And this is a very open attack against, as Killian mentioned, at least 30,000 in the United States. We're talking about possibly hundreds of thousands of companies vulnerable to this worldwide. That is a serious move in the like cybersecurity space, and like a lot of people are trying to figure out why this was done, like, because again, this is very, very provocative, and some are seeing is this like a test of the new administration to see like what they're going to do, or like what exactly is this, because cybersecurity professionals haven't really seen something on this scale very often. It kind of reminds me back to the WannaCry thing a while ago, where they discovered a vulnerability and suddenly somebody went out and just tried to attack everything. We haven't seen, obviously, the ransomware behavior, but there is a threat actor who's decided to just like put all the chips in, and that's a really unique and frankly dangerous situation for a lot of these like smaller companies that are involved now. So also, I just have to mention, hello to everyone in the chat. We see your messages, and if you have any questions about this, we're going to answer them as best we can. So we wanted to dedicate today's Q&A episode to this Hafnium attack because it is so big and has such ramifications. We want to show you guys like actually what happened and what people can do to figure out if they've been hit by this. Because if you're part of a small or medium-sized company that runs an Exchange server, like the odds are that you've been hit in some way and that there's something there, even if you haven't been specifically targeted, you were probably part of this large push if certain conditions are met. Like you have an Exchange server on premises and it's connected to the internet. So yeah, like that's not a very long list of things.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I threw up my browser here really quick. Varonis has a great article that we wrote. Our security researchers put it together to share some of the knowledge that we've gained. I want to talk about this very quickly. And Microsoft has done a great job putting out security bulletins and steps and offering scripts and some tools to detect some of this and find out if you're vulnerable. And a little bit later, I want to walk you through them. But I just want to throw this up very quickly. And just show everybody. So we can link to this, I think, afterwards. Our security research team did put together a little bit of background about the the vulnerability, the CVEs involved. Hafnium is a state-sponsored APT group out of China, and this is absolutely huge. And our incident response team here at Varonis has been helping customers deal with this since we started hearing about this. And the one thing that I did want to highlight just very quickly is that it's a multi-step process, and most of the versions of Exchange are vulnerable to one or more of those CVEs that we showed. And typically what we're seeing is the first one to get in the door is anybody with that Exchange on-prem server in a vulnerable version that's connected to the internet, that has Outlook Web Access or OWA exposed to the internet on port 443 is a target, and very likely is, has been hit, or people are looking for it and scanning it already. So I guess before we get any further, there are patches patched today. I don't want to tell you to stop watching the stream, but if you have an unpatched server, come back to us in a few minutes and patch that up, and we'll talk a little bit more, because that's not the end of it though. Patching is just the first step. If they've established a connection, if they've gotten in, some of the other CVEs let them get like system rights on there to execute malicious code or move laterally or drop a web shell to connect and establish other footholds into there. Those are not taken care of just by patching. So that's where some of the monitoring and other detective and preventative controls come into play. But to get you there...
Sorry, I just wanted to say to everybody who's in the chat that thinks we're not live, we are live, Jason. All right, so go on, Killian.
Yeah, good call. So that's kind of just the general flow is, once they've established that connection, I think every version more or less of Exchange is vulnerable to the first one to get people in, and then there are a couple versions that are not vulnerable to some of the other ones that allow different levels of access, but a lot of versions are. So in these cases, we've seen them establish this web shell. They're going to extract information out of the mailboxes. They're going to get system on those Exchange servers, and typically those are connected to a lot of things. They're going to, of course, move laterally, try and get different permissions, or pull with if you're running a system, you can pull memory out of the machine, dump it, get other credentials. So if your admin's logged in, for example, they could possibly get admin credentials off of that. So there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen.
Wow.
But with all that said, what I want to do today, and Kody, I don't know if we walked through this before. I grabbed some of the tools from Microsoft's site and some of the scripts, and I have a lab here that I'm running in that has a version of Exchange that is vulnerable. So I just want to walk everybody through kind of the steps to show people out there, if you're working with a business, you're not sure about this, here are some of the things that maybe you can do or help, or if you know somebody, your cousin, uncle, brother, sister, mom, whoever works at a company and they're in IT and security, this is maybe something that they want to know, and just walk through this. I will also give a shout out, since we're live, if you're a Varonis customer or Varonis prospect watching, we have a larger event tomorrow. We can put a link in that is going to go into a little bit more depth on this. I'm going to be live tomorrow as well before the event, covering some of the similar information with our IR team, kind of going over that. So we have a lot of resources that we want to bring to the audience dealing with this, because this is really pretty devastating.
Cool. And also, one question in the chat was, how does this Hafnium attack work? Well, fortunately for you, we're about to show exactly how it works.
Yeah.
Just to give you guys also like an idea of who's vulnerable to this, there's lots of different businesses that, for like regulatory reasons or other reasons, have to have like an on-premises Exchange server. They're not allowed to use the cloud or move certain data. They have to like have control over their data, or maybe they just don't have the resources to like migrate to this. So like, it's really scary that there's a lot of businesses that are important, but don't have like the IT staff to really like deal with this problem very quickly, because like these people can be in tremendously important positions, yet just not have a lot of IT like support or whatever in their office, and that makes them a really, really easy target to this sort of attack. So we're talking about all the really bad stuff that can happen. This is an automated attack that's gone out that's been able to compromise lots and lots of people, but within that subset there are specific groups that are being targeted by very advanced techniques that are very frightening. So that's kind of what we want to go into. Like basically, now that we've identified like the group of people that might be vulnerable to this, like what could happen if you're a business that's kind of interesting, and once you're compromised, the attackers like maybe you want to take a step further. So yeah.
Right. And just to answer that question too, so it's this particular CVE, this first one, is really the doorway to the rest of them. This is the big one, the server-side request forgery. so, if you're saying, oh, we have, two-factor, we have these other controls in place, this vulnerability basically lets them bypass that. If you have OWA and 443 open for your Exchange server, they can send this, I think it's like a malformed request or a custom forged request to that allows them to bypass all of that stuff. That's just, hey, sure, you're cool, come on in. So two-factor and things like that won't necessarily help in this case, unfortunately.
Wow. Oh, so we also have one comment on the stream, which I think is great. You basically tell us how to rob a bank and what tools we should use, but then you tell us not to do it. Well, there's documentaries on how people rob banks, and I mean, some of those people got away with it, but most of them didn't. And in fact, like most people who try to commit cybercrime get caught. So this is an educational cybersecurity channel. We try to teach people what these attacks look like so they can keep themselves safe. If you would like us to do a stream scolding you about how you should never ever do these things for 45 minutes, we could do that as well. But we believe that information should be freely available so that everybody has access to it. And that's why we do these streams. So if you're worried that you might get like so tempted by what we're about to teach you to break into 30,000 enterprise companies around the world, just try to restrain yourself, because we do give warnings about the stuff that is illegal. And I mean, this stuff is possible. It is not hard in many cases. So if it's a revelation to you that doing things that are illegal is actually pretty easy in a lot of cases, then I'm sorry, buddy, but there's a lot of things out there that are illegal and relatively easy to do. We just need to make sure that these very high impact illegal things are very well known. People understand the kinds of attacks so that they can keep themselves safe. And the next time someone's just like, yeah, I don't think we need to update our Exchange server, this doesn't sound very important, you can tell them, no, even I understand how this works, and I'm not even in cybersecurity. So that's why we teach this, and that's why, even though we show you guys how these sorts of things are done, it's up to you to understand what is allowed and what's not allowed, because we tell you, and we're very explicit about it. And if you want to launch an attack against the entire world, like using the techniques that we're showing on the show, then that is your own destiny. All right, Killian, proceed.
No, that's perfect. I did want to give a shout out to the Microsoft Security Response Center. They have a lot of great documentation too. We link it from the Varonis article as well. We can put it down there. But as I mentioned, I'm going to walk through some of the information that they've provided in scripts to detect some of this stuff. So today we're not going to break into anything, thankfully. We're going to show you how to detect some of this. So there's a GitHub library out there for Microsoft where they publish a lot of PowerShell scripts, a lot of places to go to detect it. There's some Nmap scan that I'll show you in just a moment here. That's a whole script for it. The proxy logon script to detect maybe some weird, vulnerabilities if you've been potentially compromised as well. And then there was a brand new one that I saw that was just published. This compare hashes today. Yeah, today. We're live, 10:20 or 10:21 here. It looks like it was just published. I saw it earlier. I haven't run it yet, but maybe a little bit later on, we'll give it a try. We'll throw it in PowerShell and see what happens. That's the fun of live YouTube. I don't know what's going to happen. So with that, I think the first thing I want to do is kind of walk through it, a defense plan. First thing is, if you have Exchange on-prem, find out what your servers are and get those patched. Now, sometimes we hear customers go, well, I'm not sure, I don't know, or maybe the IT is unaware of like a group running like a test or dev one that might be hooked up. So they have to find it another way. So let me show you two ways to find that very quickly. I'm going to minimize this here. I have two windows open. I'm going to switch back and forth, and hopefully I'll be able to zoom in. This is my Exchange server right here. I have my Exchange management console. I can zoom in just a little bit. But if you know of your Exchange environment, you say, hey, which servers do I have to patch? Microsoft has a PowerShell script, get Exchange server, and it'll list out the Exchange servers and the role and stuff like that. This isn't the be all and end all. In my environment, I only have one machine here. Oh, there we go. That we can see, and this is the one we're going to test on. But that's one way to get this information. And you can actually, one of the scripts, the test proxy logon script, you can use the output of this to test all of them. If you have OWA running on them to tell you. I'm only going to run it on one because I only have one box, but this is part of that script potentially. So that's a way to do it. The other way to do it is with the Nmap script. That's also linked in the GitHub page as well. So I've downloaded the Nmap script already. It's very straightforward. You don't need to worry a whole lot about it. So let me open it up, and I'll type in the command to show everybody before I run it. Nmap, and then There we go. So I saved it in the directory that I'm in right now, my scripts directory. You can download the script right off of this site. You don't need to worry too much about it. If I wanted to, I can put some additional flags in there to specify port 443 for HTTPS. I'm not going to. It's just one box. It's just going to take just a moment. And then I have the IP address of my Exchange server that I just looked at. So I'm going to type that in, 199.167. There we go. You can do a range here. If you weren't sure and you wanted to scan your whole subnet, you could do 01/24 to do the whole subnet. If you didn't know they were out there, and that's the point that I wanted to make. I know this is the one Exchange server I had because it's the lab.
Could you zoom in just a tiny bit?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and do that in just a second. There we go. So super simple. Nmap is installed. This is on a Windows server. It should work the same way. The flag is --script. And there's my NSE script. And then the only other thing is what I want to look at. One IP address here, I could do a range if I wanted to. So I could go 0/24. If I wanted to do the whole 199 subnet. But and it runs. I ran it before. It'll scan all of them. But for the sake of demonstration, let me just put in my IP address here.
So this script is looking for indicators of a compromise or a vulnerable Exchange server?
Yep, exactly.
Judging by the name? Got it.
Yep, there it is. Okay, so here we go. I didn't limit it just to the port 443, so it did a scan at all of them. But here we can see that it'll tell you that it is vulnerable. It'll check the version that you're running, and then if it is vulnerable and say, yep, this is Exchange 2013, it is vulnerable right now because it's not patched. You can see the different numbers here, I believe, are the patch versions.
So
this is a vulnerable one.
If you were to go into your work and you were to connect to your network and then run this Nmap scan and it said in all caps like vulnerable, that would be perhaps a sign that somebody on your IT staff had not yet updated your Exchange server, and you would still be wide open to this ongoing attack. So this is also not you're not exploiting this, you're not doing anything that would really get you in trouble. So if you have any sort of IT access to run a scan like this, then this is one of those scans where it's just checking to see if something exists and is vulnerable. It's not doing a NICTO scan or something where your IT department's going to be like, excuse me, I see that you've been doing some interesting things with your computer on our network. This is one of the safer things you could do just to check to make sure that somebody didn't miss this at a business that you work at.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. Hey, it's the ones you got to protect, of course, is the ones you don't know that could come and bite you. And this is a great way to do that broad check across all the network. And again, sometimes teams will spin up dev or test boxes to work on different things that might be connected. And it might not be part of your standard deployment, but it might be out there and still on the internet and vulnerable. So this is a good way to double check and get some of that reassurance.
And because that guy was talking about robbing banks, if we were a red team, then this would also be an indication that if we had been hired to audit the security of this company, we already would have found a huge red flag that we would need to include in our report. Yeah,
exactly. So this is that first thing. So hey, here's the maybe the short list. I know I have to go patch these. So right after this step, in an IT or business setting, go get the patches, patch it right now at that point. Just to cut off that potential vulnerability. The next part of it is to check and see if there are any signs of compromise. So Microsoft has a big list of IOCs. They also have some scripts that they can check to see what's out there. So let me pop back over to my Exchange server really quick and run one of the other scripts that they have, the test proxy logon script. So go ahead, Kody.
Yeah, one thing I was going to mention is if you run the first Nmap script and you see, okay, this is vulnerable, there's a very high percentage chance that it has been compromised automatically by one of these scripts. It's not that this business that you're working at is super important, that the Chinese are just yes, the ranch supply store. But no, this is more there's an automatic tool going out there spraying this exploit. So there are still some mitigating factors. Maybe this wasn't configured in a way that the automatic tool would be able to exploit it because some IT person made some mistake or a misconfiguration while connecting it to the public internet. But still, if you see that it's vulnerable and it is connected to the internet, it's a very, very likely chance that you're going to see this next indicator of compromise, because it's just such an astronomical number of different companies and exchange servers that have been hit by this initial attack.
Right, exactly. So this one I'm going to run. This is another one I downloaded right off the Microsoft GitHub. I'm running it from my exchange management cell. It's a PowerShell script, PS1. So just running it in this context. And what it's going to do is just check and see if there's any weird behavior in the logs here. So you can see there's a little bar there that says it's checking for that in the HTTP proxy logs as it goes across. This one, it's a lab. It's in a closed environment. We shouldn't see anything because there shouldn't be HTTP open. But again, this is an example of what we'd see here. I'd be shocked if I saw anything, but I want to show everybody how to run it very quickly and what to expect. This is some exciting YouTube.
Right? Well, what would be scary is like if, we set up this lab, we propped it up and the Chinese were like, bam, and just like managed to break into it and like exploit it like before we finish the stream. That would be pretty incredible. There it goes. It was going really slow. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was supposed to tell me something. So here's just an example output. In this case, on this particular one, that script didn't find anything suspicious. I am a paranoid person from being in the security, even if it didn't say that there were a couple other places in some of the logs to check. So even if it comes back saying, nothing suspicious detected, there are certain other things that we can help, of course, check with. Microsoft has a tool as well that's part of their Defender package. It's like it's a scanning component, like a standalone scanner that will check for signs of potential compromise on the servers. Again, even if this returns nothing, I would still run that for sure. They have another couple scripts that will help reject some of those, some of the HTTP requests that are forged. I would definitely recommend running that as well after you patched. And then continuing to monitor some of the other indicators. So monitoring what the machine account or the system account on that Exchange server is doing. Do we see any odd connections to other devices on the network? Do we see odd connections going out of proxy or over DNS that we're not expecting to see from those servers? Things like that. Well, even monitoring who may be logged into that Exchange server, so the admin accounts that might have logged into that box, to have them rotate their passwords, just in case they got dumped, right? Yeah, there's so many different directions you could take from the initial compromise if someone, if the person behind the breach took an interest in exploiting further. So it's very spooky to take a look at some of the different paths they could take to escalate their privileges or otherwise take advantage of that initial beachhead.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other one that, like I said, is brand new is the compare Exchange hashes, and I believe it checks for modification of any of the Exchange files in the IIS virtual directory. This is a brand new one for me. I just got it right before the stream, so I haven't run it. Cody, do you want to try this live and see what happens?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, let's try a tool that we've never tried before live. That's going to go, based on everything I know about demos, this should go great.
Yeah, and the instructions are just kind of run this. I think it's only going to work on the virtual directories. And I think it's just going to compare the hashes to known good ones for the Exchange virtual directory to see if there's anything in there. Okay. So it's downloading something. Look at that.
Second stage. Great.
I'll zoom in. Hold on. Like I said, this is completely new. So everybody here is learning exactly what this is doing, live on air with us.
So this was the Microsoft tool that's supposed to look for further sketchy behavior and indicators of compromise?
Yeah, so I'll show you. This is going to compare some of the hashes in the with known good ones, I believe. And I think that's why they just downloaded it for the baseline.
Zam was also asking if we could make the text a little bit bigger even still.
Let me give it a try. Let me see if I can go to 200.
Yeah, that's better.
There we go. Okay, cool.
Okay, so like so when you say that it's comparing hashes, like for people that might not understand what that is, it's looking specifically for files that might be named something different or whatever else, but they still have the same contents exactly as known indicators of compromise. So
Right.
these are configuration settings or other things that have been noticed as standing out as unique, like only coming from this attack. And if you have it on
Right.
your system, it means that somebody has put this exact file there with no modifications whatsoever. And the odds of that happening are very, very low
Yeah.
unless you were actually attacked.
Yeah. And this is like a good way to explain this is like the very most rudimentary, maybe like antivirus type of scan, where what it'll do is it'll take like a known good. So if you have the same file, the same contents, it doesn't really matter what it's named. If it's exactly the same in terms of contents and you hash it, the hash will always come out to be the same. So if you have a known good, you have that baseline. But if you change literally anything, if you put a space in or an extra character or something else in the file itself, it will change the output of the hash completely. It will be completely different, just the way it works. So that way you can do that baseline and checking. So that way, if you hash a new file, even if it's called, exchange.dll, you can call it whatever you want. But if Kody, snuck in and did some malicious things to replace exchange.dll with one he crafted, because Kody's tricky like that, on my closed lab, because he's not doing anything illegal, I let him do it. But it looks the same, it has all the same information. He crafted the metadata, he was very careful. He went in and he rewrote the file system metadata, so it looks the same, but the hash isn't going to lie because it's different than the known good one that I have.
So, we had a question about Exchange online versus Exchange on-prem. If somebody has like an Exchange server in the cloud, is it vulnerable to this as well?
That's an awesome question. So Exchange Online is not vulnerable to this. So it's just the on-prem versions right now, yeah.
And most large businesses will have like a cloud system for most of their Exchange stuff. So this tends to like more focus in on like medium and smaller sized businesses that for whatever reason have an on-prem server. It's and a lot of these companies, frankly, barely have the resources to be running an on-prem server. So like managing all these updates and doing all this stuff after it's been compromised is a real headache for them, because larger businesses that use cloud services generally actually have the staff or the right companies on retainer to deal with these sorts of things a lot more quickly. So yeah, this is a kind of a nefarious attack because it's going after some of the least prepared people. Really, like these big businesses that have the cloud exchange could deal with these sort of attacks better, but the people that are being affected are really in kind of a hard place. So that's what is kind of notable about this attack and why I in particular was really kind of mortified by it. It's just a real mess.
Yeah. So this script still looks like it's doing something. It's just going to take a little while to hash them. Hashing can be a fairly computationally intensive process. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take. Because like I said, this is brand new live YouTube. I grabbed it this morning right before, and it's like, we'll put it on the internet and see what happens.
Oh yeah, Michael in the chat says, "Man, this is slow going." Yeah, well, we're also trying out a tool we've never done before completely live. So I'm amazed that we haven't like blue screened at this point.
Yeah.
Because based on my luck with trying stuff live, that's usually how it goes.
I'm just going to take a look and see what I'm chewing up on here. PowerShell's eating a little bit of processes. It's still doing something though, which is good.
Spawning backdoor.
Yeah. Cool. While this is going through stuff, do we have any other questions that we want to cover, or we can I can leave this up and see what happens.
So one question was, do we know any of the names of the victims yet? Like, has anybody come forward and confirmed that they were hit by this? And this is, you guys, this is such a thorny question because companies really never ever want to admit to like having been hit by a cybersecurity breach. So like we're bound, by our contracts and everything to not talk about like companies that we've helped out that have been hit by this. Right. But there are lots of companies that have been hit by this. So we just. Killen, do you know of anyone that's publicly disclosed that they've been, this is such a new attack too. It usually takes a while for people to figure out what happened before they go public with it. But like there will be names that you've probably heard of that have been affected by this, I would assume.
Off the top of my head, I don't know of any or none that at least that I can talk about right now. It's just, I mean, it's such a big attack and so many people are struggling with this. Chances are, like you said, Kody, there's some business that we know or that we work with or have some relationship with that's probably been affected. So it's it's one of those, I guess, coming together moments in the cybersecurity world where we're all kind of battling the same threat. A lot of the time, so many people got hit with the SolarWinds attack, and this came kind of the 1-2 punch right after that. People are still kind of getting, or their head just kind of stopped spinning from that, and then to get hit with this right afterwards at this massive scale is it's been pretty brutal. I don't I don't envy my friends in the IT and cybersecurity world battling this. It's tough, and I feel for everybody out there.
Yeah, and it's you should also understand, like, there's people are kind of still in freak out mode right now where they're trying to assess the damage and get to people that need help. So this is still like a pretty crazy time for figuring out like what is going on with this attack. And I also wanted to answer one question that's not totally on topic, but is just an excellent question. Hello, I recently found a vulnerability, and for a second, I thought they were going to send me the vulnerability and exploit my computer, which is like already, people tried to do that like 3 times this year, so I was just like, no. But they're like, no. But the company doesn't have a bug bounty program. What should I do if I haven't received a response to my vulnerability report? And this happens actually all the time. For one, don't get more aggressive and don't demand money, because a lot of businesses that aren't so good at understanding this sort of stuff will see that as threatening behavior and literally just call the FBI and ruin your career. Instead, work with a bug bounty program like BugCrowd or Hackeroni, also known to some people as HackerOne. They can help you reach out to the company and responsibly disclose it so that you don't get in trouble, you don't get anybody trying to sue you, you don't get any cease and desist. I mean, there's still companies that react poorly, so that's why it's so careful to tread carefully while you're a beginning cybersecurity researcher and you want to do things the right way. So yeah, if you haven't gotten a response back yet, reach out to one of the bigger bug bounty services and see if they can help you do responsible disclosure to that company, so you can make sure that the stuff gets patched, even if you can't get paid on this one because the company isn't willing to play ball. It sucks when that happens, but you can't force a company to pay you for finding a bug bounty, a bug, like if they haven't entered into a bug bounty program. The best you can do is start working with someone like BugCrowd or something that can make sure you don't get in trouble while you're doing this. So really, really good questions. And also, hello to everybody in the chat: Victor, Zam, and 8-Bit. Zam was also saying that he wanted to talk about how why so many small and medium-sized businesses are vulnerable. The companies don't have dedicated IT staff and only contract out work when they notice something is broken. Like that's a circumstance with so many, like everything from dental providers to like local government to local school departments. There's lots of different businesses or organizations that end up with these sorts of requirements where they only call someone to do IT work when stuff is broken. So they don't have really a guy to rely on, and that guy is probably super busy right now dealing with all their other clients. So a lot of these people are stuck waiting at the back of the line when these are still, it could be, an entire educational region that needs to have this patch right now but doesn't have anybody they know to go to, or a hospital or something like that. There's really a lot of different businesses that could be in a bind over this, and that's why so many people are freaking out about getting people the help they need.
Yeah. The other thing I want to point out too is, and we're seeing this change, and we're seeing it move into a positive way. But historically, going back a couple years, even security was kind of always looked at as like a cost center. Like this is something that we have to do, or and it's not helping drive the business forward. It's not helping us make money. We're spending all this money, and it had, I don't know, a negative connotation is not the right thing, but it was always an area where they did what they had to do, but it wasn't always the biggest budget, or they didn't always have the most headcount. So a lot of these small medium businesses, and even some large businesses, really do the best with what they have. But trying to sell it up to the business as this is an area for investment to improve our business, improve functionality, was sometimes a challenge in the past. And we're seeing that start to change, where security is becoming much more of a value add to the business. They want to do these things. They want to do these projects. They want to collaborate to drive the business forward. And security is able to come in and say, we can add value to that by helping you do that in a way that is enabling the business, doing what you want to, meeting your goals, but in a way that's going to protect us. And we can sell that to our customers and clients that this is something that we're concerned about, and that if you trust us as a business, we are going to offer you kind of in return that trust that we're going to protect your data to a very high standard. So I'm so happy that this conversation is happening, and my struggling IT teams and my struggling security teams out there are getting some resources and getting a little love. So that makes me really excited as a security professional.
Yeah, and I also see businesses that traditionally have ignored this sort of thing that are realizing how important it is. Just as a little example, I live in a medium-sized town on the border of Canada, and I went into a dentist and I told them that I was like, hey, you guys have your Wi-Fi configured in a way you absolutely should not do for a business. And they're like, oh, you know about fixing computers. Great. So there's only one guy in this whole town that knows how to fix computers and does our IT stuff. And this guy sucks. He really doesn't know what he's doing. Could you do all of our IT work? When can you start? And it's like, you do not want me anywhere near your computers. I only break computers. That is my job. Common mistake. It's okay. I get this all the time. But these businesses that, traditionally have just gone to some guy that does a mediocre job are hunting for new, some way out of that kind of relationship where they only call when they have a problem. The guy gets back to them in 2 weeks. So they realize this is not stuff they can let wait. This is really critical data. They hear the stuff in the news and now they might even be victims of this. So they're trying to find somebody, or at least be able to get a grip on what good service is when it comes to keeping their stuff up to date and safe. Because if you don't, it can end up costing a lot more money.
Yeah. I saw somebody in the comments here. I was able to bring them up on my screen. Someone asking about 8-bit, asking about complying with Hipaa laws. I mean, HIPAA's a big thing, and I wouldn't underestimate the need for that. It's a lot of really important, really confidential, sensitive data, and that plays a big part in protecting some of this too, making sure you have the controls in place. To monitor the data, to make sure that the right people are using it for the right reasons, and we could have a whole side discussion about the various compliance regulations, HIPAA, CCPA, GDPR. Tons of other U.S. states have them. Of course, GDPR in Europe. I think Brazil has one, or came out with another big one recently. You can probably throw a dart and hit a country and they have some type of compliance regulation, but they all deal with very similar concepts in a lot of cases. Is it's okay to have the data that's sensitive. It's okay to use it as long as it's being used for the defined business process. You know who's using it. You know why they're using it. You have a least privilege in most cases where it's very tightly controlled for that business need, or a zero trust perspective.
Oh yeah, Victor in the chat says that his girlfriend can't even work from home because of HIPAA, because she's a medical biller.
Yeah, depending on the type of information you have and the process that you have, it can be very, very strict.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Wow, it looks like the tool's actually done. It's writing the results, but it's finally finished checking. Man, for just running through and looking for hashes, it took a surprising amount of time. But I guess that when you're dealing with a sophisticated APT group, potentially that has a high degree of ability to camouflage things, then you got to be thorough.
Yeah, and this server is, I would imagine, I didn't look at the specs beforehand, but it's probably barely hanging on in terms of processor and CPU in the lab environment, because it's not an active box. It's not actually handling anything, so it's up, it's there. We can mess around with it, but it's not winning any contests. We're not mining any crypto or anything on it.
So presumably, for all of this fanfare, we're going to get a report that says nothing sketchy has appeared on this computer. There are no suspicious hashes, and that is what you should absolutely hope to get. Because if it's hey, we've identified these hashes, it means that you definitely have been hit, and you need to assume that something worse has happened just to make sure you don't miss something. If it were to come back and say, there's indicators of compromise, then you just really don't know how deep into your system these people have gotten. And at that point, it doesn't really make sense to just pat yourself on the back for patching the system awesome, I did great, this is 100% secure. No, there's probably a backdoor on it. And in fact, if it has a web shell, the web shell is what's kind of scary about this. A lot of security researchers were speculating, again, this is speculation, that if somebody figured out a way to break into these web shells and locate them, it could cause a really serious problem. The same way that we saw North Korea take advantage of the WannaCry situation by pushing out this exploit once they figured out how to take advantage of it. A third party could potentially take advantage of these compromises and further muddy the situation. And again, this could be deliberate to make it more difficult to understand who's using this infrastructure now that it's been set up. So, if you open the floodgates and let basically anybody connect to these infected machines, or make it easy enough that other, adversaries can do it, you really create a confusing situation where, people can be executing multiple types of malware. You can have some guy that's like trying to ransomware everyone. You can have someone who's trying to steal files. You can have someone who's trying to do an intelligence operation and go deeper and like start like spying on these companies. It's really, the fact that after these boxes have been compromised, they've been left kind of like wide open to further compromise by these web shells is something that a lot of people are very spooked about because there's so many of them out there.
Yeah, and that's another great point that you bring up too. Is just maybe all of these things come up and everything's great and no worries but I wouldn't necessarily. There we go, perfect. No malicious files were found. I wouldn't take this as gospel. No, malicious files were found here. But again, I'm a paranoid security person. I think maybe a lot of people watching are the same way. I would still very closely monitor this. And monitor my perimeter traffic and my proxy traffic to see if there's any odd or suspicious connections going out to places that we don't expect or known malicious places, in case the attackers got in some way and established that persistency on there. So here we go. This was pretty straightforward, and I'm glad we ran through it here live on the air. It took a few minutes, but at least everybody out there who might have to run this can use this as a reference of. It's pretty straightforward, and, but this might be something that, people would not be familiar with or never had to run type of a PowerShell script to do any of this. So, I mean, for a negative result, which we kind of expected, it's at least good to see it once before you're under pressure to do it, maybe at a business.
Cool. And we've also... thank you everybody in the chat also that's asking questions and stuff. I'm trying to answer them as best we can. I probably can't answer how to install AMD GPU drivers, so Victor can get crazy with Hashcat. But I can say that you can just spin up an AWS instance and do the same thing if it gets too frustrating, because that's what I'm doing this week.
I was going to say congratulations on getting an AMD GPU.
Cool. All right, so we've been through this tool that's supposed to tell us if we have been visibly attacked, if there's known indicators of compromise. And again, like if you found yourself to be vulnerable and you don't see these, it still doesn't mean that you haven't been hit. Right. This is just a guideline to let you know if there's very obvious signs of being hit. But this is a very sophisticated group, and while a lot of this exploitation was pretty recent and pretty flagrant, there was also a much more stealthy campaign that was operating before this. So again, this is not necessarily saying hey, this is the definitive sign that you've been compromised. This is just saying if you see this stuff, you definitely have been. But if you don't, it still doesn't mean that you're free and clear, especially if you meet all the conditions of having this connected to the internet, having a vulnerable version running, and everything else.
Absolutely.
Also, Zam was asking if anybody has any pre-exploited system images.
That's a good question. Not as far as I know. I don't know if any security researchers out there are offering that. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure, I'm sure our security team here at Varonis that's doing some of this research probably has something, or maybe they did it themselves using some tools out there. But I don't know any off the top of my head that are offering something like that to explore it. But that could be pretty cool if we find out anybody is. Thank you. That's a good question.
Let's see. Do we have... So also, since we are live today, if you guys have any other questions about the Hafnium attack, feel free to drop them in the chat. Killian, do you have any other tools to show off related to Hafnium? Or should we take some more general questions?
Let's take some more general questions. I ran through the stuff that I knew that I could show today. Some of the other scripts that are out there are just that Microsoft has provided, at least are protecting the machines, things like that. So nothing that we can spend a ton of time on right now. So yeah, general questions are great. Let's go ahead and open it up.
Cool. So one question we have right now from Victor was kind of related to the next attack lab that we're going to be doing, which this is one that I've been working on. Actually, it's a webinar. So I'm going to be teaching how somebody who's like a half mile away can break into a Wi-Fi network, scan it, discover that there's like a file share or something else like in the office or connected to it, and then ransomware it with a single Python script. So the key here is being able to break into like a business Wi-Fi network undetected. And Victor was asking, like, are you guys going to do an episode on like an IDS system or something to protect your Wi-Fi, protect your network that's looking for this sort of suspicious behavior, maybe using a Raspberry Pi? And that's actually an excellent idea.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like there's a couple things that can act as like a sort of IDS. Like for example, I will just run like Kismet and have it looking for suspicious things like access points that are mirroring the name of a different access point, or that are rapidly switching their names, which is usually like I plugged in my Wi-Fi Pineapple and forgotten about it, and then like my Kismet is just like, warning, you're under attack, and it's just like, oh my god, and then I'm like, oh no, it's just a stupid thing I plugged in. So Kismet is what I would typically run if I wanted a light like IDS to just determine what's connected to what, look at its history, and look for suspicious behavior. What I love about Kismet is like you can click on any individual client, and the new version of Kismet, which runs perfectly fine on the Raspberry Pi, will give you a web interface you can go into and see every network that device is connected to, like whether it's been doing anything suspicious, whether it's been, for example, like if it's an access point, if it's been changing its name, or if it's been like jumping different channels. And it also looks for like suspicious behavior, like channel jumping, or like other things that are related to trying to trick someone into joining a malicious network, or otherwise like exploiting automated behavior. So it's not as like intensive as some other IDSs that are like dedicated IDSs. Like this is very much like a signals intelligence platform. It is what you make it. All the data's there. It's presented very nicely, but you have to be kind of responsible for looking for more specific types of attacks. But I still think it's really cool that, Kismet can be run so easily on a Raspberry Pi, even on one of the older models if you have it connected to a network. So that might be what we end up showing off. But if anybody in the chat has any recommendations for an IDS that they like, especially if it might run on, Raspberry Pi, it would be lovely to hear. Or Killian, if you know of anything that would be cool to run on a Pi on the network.
I was going to say the last time I installed like an IDS system was Snort, and that was a little while ago. I don't know if Snort has a Raspberry Pi version, but it's been a couple years since I did a good Snort install, so it'd probably be a wake up call to try and do it again.
Yeah, and Zam's also pointing out that there are some newer access points that also proactively like spot and detect these attacks. It's just sometimes confusing for beginners to go in and like figure out like what these settings are, which need to be turned on, which need to be turned off, and which might actually interfere with your ability to like connect. Like so for example, like I know I was just like, like we should use like MAC address whitelisting, and then like I get an Android phone that spins its MAC address literally every time I connect to a Wi-Fi network, so people can't track me. And the researcher side of me is just like, great, I'm private now. But like the IT side of me is just like, now I cannot use any sort of MAC filtering because like this device has completely broken it. So like there's some security features there that like you're just like, straightforward, I'll use it, I'll add my device, but then like some other security feature will break it. So this can be a little bit of a cat and mouse game using the built-in features on your access point, especially if it's provided, by your internet service provider, because those ones typically have some confusing settings enabled by default. But yeah, one thing, of course, is like if you do have, an internet service provider provided a box, then just remember, someone else was asking if there's easy ways to crack WPA networks besides just brute forcing. Yes, WPS Pixie is amazingly still a thing. So if you have a router that was given to you by your internet service provider, please turn off your WPS setup pin. There's no reason to have it on. And if it's vulnerable, it can be broken into in about 15 seconds. So that is still a thing. And on the subject of Wi-Fi hacking, the other attack that's very common right now is social engineering. You create an access point that looks like the access point that they were just connected to, but with no password. You kick them off of their regular access point, and when they connect to your open access point, you present a phishing page that looks like the router complaining about an update that requires the password to reset the internet connection. At that point, people are lulled into believing that they are in a fight with the router and not in a fight with you, and they will deal with the machine the only way they know how, by giving it what they want, and in reward, they will get their internet back. Most people don't even know they've been hit when this happens, but it's such a smooth social engineering attack that it's kind of like in my repertoire of Wi-Fi attacks I talk about, it's kind of replaced some of the more standard ones that are just based on Wi-Fi cracking, because if someone's there and they're likely to do this, it's just so much easier.
And Kody, it's funny to think back. It's been what, just a year and maybe a couple weeks since the last time we saw each other in person. I think, weren't you doing that? The Wi-Fi hacking duel was something very similar at RSA in 2020.
Yes. Well, at RSA in 2020, we actually got to be the only people that were really teaching people how to hack on the floor of the vendor room.
Mm-hmm.
So we just had random salespeople come up and we taught them how to hack this little prototype Stefan and I made that was just an access point that was being joined over and over and over by a client.
Yep.
And they basically, it was a race to the password. So we just had these random salespeople learn how to hack Wi-Fi in like 5 minutes and then compete against each other for like a prize of like $250. It was wild. These people like...
It was awesome.
I've always told people that like, you could learn to hack Wi-Fi in about 5 minutes if you were really paying attention. And I think we definitely proved it with that game.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad because I really want to go out there and do this stuff more often. I miss also doing in-person events in Los Angeles at like Null Space Labs. So hopefully we'll be able to go out there and start doing these things again and start teaching people in person at conferences and stuff like that. I cannot wait to start going to more conferences. I need you nerds around me to fucking function. Sorry. It's been a long pandemic. But yeah,
I get you.
It's just so hard to like not have other hackers around you and like be inspired by other people's ideas. Like a lot of this stuff has just kind of been thought up by bouncing around with other people who get excited about this sort of thing. So hopefully, we can do this stuff again soon. All right, other questions. I'll curse less. I yelled at James for saying boomer 3 times on the stream last time, and like now I'm cursing on the stream.
That's all worked up.
Yeah, right. It's just like I need these nerds, you guys. Like I can't live in a small town without people that like to hack stuff. It just bothers me. Okay, so one question was about do you know any good, this is a great question. Do you know any good bad USB platforms? So a bad USB platform is something that you plug into a computer, it pretends to be a keyboard, and it can execute scripts very quickly. Now, I know like 4 bad USB platforms. All of them are pretty good, so let me rattle them off. The DigiSpark is the cheapest one that can do the least and is the most annoying to program, but it costs about $1.80 if you buy them from China. Very cool, very straightforward, but you have to like basically flash it with a new script every time you want to add a new script. Kind of limitation. Next up, the USB rubber ducky. I don't know that you can buy them anymore, but if you can buy them, you slap an SD card in it, you can put a couple scripts on it, and you can do certain things to trigger a different script if you add different firmware. Kind of intermediary when it comes to how difficult it is to change the script if you want to do something, but we're getting there. Then the next level up is a project I've been involved with called the Wi-Fi Duck. This is by our good friend Stefan. The Wi-Fi Duck combines an ESP8266 microcontroller to give this Wi-Fi capability. So it has a web interface, and when you plug it into a computer, it automatically generates a Wi-Fi interface that lets you select which script you want to run, or just write a script on the fly. So if you were to like plug this into the back of a computer in like an office or something, you could go like a half mile away, wait until the middle of the night, and then start typing stuff on the computer live, which is pretty crazy. And you can also set it up to work like a like a USB rubber ducky, where it just runs the script as soon as you plug it in as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it, and it's kind of a step up. Now, up from that, I believe is the Malduino W, which is by our friend Jonty, and that is a really slick hardware prototype of the Wi-Fi Duck that's kind of like branded and stuff that basically does all the same stuff, but has a really nice form factor and like actually just looks like a really nice USB drive. Whereas the Wi-Fi Duck looks cool, but horrifying. And if you saw it sticking out of your computer, you would immediately call the police. Jonty's project is kind of like the final evolution of like a Wi-Fi connected USB attack tool. So the Malduino W is super cool. The Wi-Fi Duck is also open source, so you can build your own out of ugly components, which I do frequently. So those are my picks for like good, bad USB platforms. And Zam is falling on his sword for starting the boomer trend when we were doing Fedora and Red Hat. But I just don't think we should. I don't think we should pick on any segment of our audience, especially when we're doing IT stuff. Being a gatekeeper sucks. Let's see. So also we had a couple questions from the YouTube channel. And I want to see if we could take any of those as well. So if we don't get around to answering your question on the stream, we always try to look through the YouTube channel and see if there's anything that we can answer. So the first question was, This is from our last presentation. Is it possible to see the source code of that C2 Python code that you built on bypassing endpoint controls using Office macros? I feel like the answer to this is probably no. Killian, how would you reply?
I'm not actually entirely certain where or how much they got from somewhere else versus what they built themselves. I haven't investigated it that much. I don't know if we can distribute it. If we built it in house, that's something different. If we, or if we got it from an open source thing, it might be out there already. I haven't investigated that much on it, but I know we as a company didn't publish it anywhere. So I wouldn't want to promise it to anybody to download.
Yeah, so sorry. Unfortunately, like for some of these demos, like the tools are like either open source or just very lightly modified from publicly available sources. So unfortunately, when we're showing off some of these exploits, it's not a good look to give away like all the code so you could just immediately run this exact same attack yourself. We want to show you how easy it is and how it works, and you can see the code on screen. It's not like, it's not too hard. But most of the stuff is just publicly available proof of concepts that we've just taken and very lightly modified. And unfortunately, we can't bundle this as a baby's first guide exploiting like someone else's computer. So I appreciate you guys are interested, but unfortunately, we can't let everything go as the whole package deal because we literally showed you guys every single other piece of this attack. So at that point, like that's when we're like putting the gun in your hand and pushing you towards the bank. So sorry.
Yeah, probably you can do a little bit of searching. A couple other tools that we've used on past streams, same exact thing. Our security research team put them together for us, and then I went out and I, bad analogy, but used a little bit of Google searching to find a comparable thing out there to play with on my own. So check around; you can probably find something. I'm sure everybody watching here is smart enough to find something that works pretty good.
So one question we also had was, what about the Raspberry Pi Zero? On the subject of bad USBs, what about the Raspberry Pi Zero as a bad USB? Like, can you do that? Yes, but also it adds the ability to act as an Ethernet, like an Ethernet device. So it actually gives you the ability to do an attack called Poison Tap. That's by Sammy Kamkar. That's really, really cool. So if you were going to be using the Raspberry Pi Zero, you might as well not stop with just doing the bad USB attack. You could also go ahead and run an attack using Ethernet as well, which is really cool and interesting. And I've also been asked about which Raspberry Pi I use. Currently, I'm using the Raspberry Pi 400 as like the computer that sits next to my computer that's just running Manjaro, even though it doesn't support, the wireless card doesn't support Wi-Fi hacking, which is a bummer. Aside from that, I mostly use the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus for anything that I need to do Wi-Fi hacking with, where I don't want to slap in an external wireless network adapter. But if I don't mind doing that, then I'll use the Raspberry Pi 4 because I have a bunch of them and they're relatively powerful. I just find that their wireless card isn't as well supported, and sometimes it can be a little bit funky, but the support for it is getting better every day. Let's see. And then there was also a suggestion. I believe this is a suggestion. It was in all caps, so I'm not totally sure. Wireshark with mobile apps. And I assume that means this is something we've kind of done before, but like connecting your phone to like a proxy network and then intercepting everything that's coming out of it when you open like a mobile application to see what it's doing, like the kind of sketchy stuff it might be up to. That's something that we've kind of done. I'm not sure if we've specifically covered it before, but proxying your own phone or man-in-the-middling your own phone to be able to see like what kind of stuff is coming out of it, what kind of stuff like your internet service provider, your roommates, like anybody logging your traffic might see is actually super interesting to me. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what that all caps person meant, but that's what I'm taking away from it because it sounds great. Oh, and look at that. Not only is our time almost up, but I'm on 9% battery. So we're going to have to wrap things up in the next couple minutes. But yeah, let's see. I think I'm still going to try to take another question. Let's see if we can pull one up.
Cool.
So this is another question from the channel. Is it possible to do this on an iPhone? Yes, it totally is. So this was talking about the Wi-Fi Duck. That's one of the bad USB platforms we were talking about. You can do this on any device with the browser. So if you want to try out the Wi-Fi Duck, then it's really, really easy to do it. And that's the point. And Stefan did a really excellent job. Let's see, what else? Next question was, what about the Pinebook from Pine64? And could you guys review that? We've actually gotten a lot of requests for this. It's interesting to note that there's lots of different pieces of hardware out there that support Kali Linux or other sorts of like Linux distributions we might want to try out. So if you guys really want us to try out something like the Pinebook, like I've been hearing about it for a long time. I actually came this close to buying one. So if you guys want to give me the excuse, then yeah, that would be something we could do. Question: why don't you charge stuff more often? Well, Michael took my my USB Type-C charge. Oh, thanks, Michael. So now so now it's just too short for my computer. So physics is why it can't physically reach to my computer.
But he has no excuse now.
Oh, and Victor has now given me excuse to buy the Pinebook Pro. So look forward to a video on working with a Raspberry Pi alternative. Frankly, honestly, I would love to try this out because, you know, there's lots of other platforms out there. The Raspberry Pi has the best name recognition, but the Pinebook Pro's been around for a while now. Like, it's definitely worth checking out. So thank you, Victor. I appreciate that excuse to spend more money on hardware. Let's see. Oh, so our last question I think we'll do for today was, I wonder why the antivirus isn't able to read the malicious macros when it's executed. And this was from our Watch Hackers Craft Malicious Office macros. Killian, can you talk about why an antivirus program wouldn't be able to notice this sort of behavior?
Sure. So in the case of what we built in that macro there, nothing, I mean, I guess you could, you know, somebody, whoever, antivirus, like watched our thing and said, oh, this is a known signature of the, you know, hacking with friends.macro.malware or whatever. They could make a signature for it. But the stuff that we built into there in terms of the command and control and stuff like that was all pretty basic stuff. And nothing by itself was like an exploit or something particular like that. So, you know, maybe best case scenario, they can flag on some, you know, weird connections or something like that. But none of the things that we put in there are necessarily super odd. We're using built-in native functionality. It, you know, spawning the other app, spawning the Outlook app, for example, is somewhat expected behavior. In terms of like bypassing the endpoint blocking it, the web connections, there could be potentially legitimate uses for establishing an HTTP post connection from a macro. You know, what it is, I don't know, but it's not necessarily that odd. Also, think how often, you know, your computer spawns you know, a connection to the web browser. I mean, every time we go online. So an HTTP connection, you know, is not super odd by itself. And we went through a little bit of extra trickery to change the user agent to look at like it's something normal. So even some perimeter defenses would may or may not see that. So
this is the technique called like living off the land, which is very, very popular, where we're not bringing in some crazy virus that like has a signature that somebody would recognize. We're basically using perfectly legitimate built-in features in a way that is allowed, but still does something malicious. So that's really the beauty of this attack, is like these are all features that are required in order to do the things that, you know, the system promises to the user. The issue is that a smart attacker can learn to manipulate these built-in tools to do things that, you know, Microsoft never intended. And just because it would break so many convenience features, this really isn't something we expect to be patched, which is fascinating to me. So I guess we do have one more question. This is just, are you a good hacker? Like good or like good at it? Like, like what do you mean? I
think you're a pretty good person, so, you know, I think you are a good hacker.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so Killian will answer for me on this one. Yes.
Yeah. I think, you know, I'm an honest third-party assessor of this situation. I'm going with yes.
All right, you guys heard it here. I am a good hacker. Thank you so much to everyone who had questions today. I think that we got some really good ones. And I think that also, if you want to know just bare basics, what you need to do if you think that your work or someone else's you care about's work has been hit with this big vulnerability you see in the news. Again, we're still, like, everybody's still kind of in panic mode about this because nobody knows the extent of the damage. We're still trying to figure it out. So we just want to get this information out there to you guys because this is a very unusual attack. You're going to be hearing more about it in the news as we figure out more and more damage. As we mentioned, you're probably going to hear, some companies you've heard of that have been exploited by this and potentially have had some bad things happen. So this is really something to keep an eye on, and this is the time to do something if you can to reduce the damage because, like I said, other people may step in and start taking advantage of these attacks and maybe use them to their own nefarious goals, like we saw with WannaCry, with somebody just taking a publicly known 0-day and using it to blast ransomware across the internet. If you want to prevent that from happening to you, then you should immediately take care of this issue if it affects any entity that you work with, your work, your home. I don't know why you would be running an Exchange server at home. Maybe you got a lot of friends. I don't care. But just make sure you patch that stuff, because another thing a lot of people aren't thinking about is if you get access to everyone's emails, you can also send emails from their accounts potentially. So if you are phishing everybody that business does business with, this attack could leapfrog from the people who are infected by this first 0-day and spread to everybody who trusts those businesses, who would open, for example, an infected Office macro or something that would then take this attack a step further. So this is just the early stages of this attack. We don't know how people are going to take advantage of this access. There's lots of bad stuff they could do. So that's why we want to make sure that you guys know what this attack looks like, you know how to check for it, and you know the basic steps of patching it if you are affected. So yeah, sorry about this hack, you guys. Seems like a bad one. Stay away from computers. What can I say?
Yep. And the other thing I'll say too is we're here to help, of course, as well. We want to bring you this information, and Varonis as a company is here to help. So we have resources too, where our IR team is investigating this. We're publishing information as we get it on our blog to make sure that we're getting this information out and put that good back out in the community.
Yep. So yes, make sure to also check out our threat update on the Varonis brand channel, which is hosted by our friend Killian, because we have some of our analysts come on and basically break down these attacks, talk about them, and go into more depth about them. So if you're interested in big ongoing attacks against major companies, this is the show to check out. You can also check out if you're I think potentially you can also check out the demo tomorrow, maybe kind of. Killian probably knows more about that than I do.
Yep. Yeah, so we actually have two things on this exact topic tomorrow. So myself and Ryan O'Boyle, who's one of our top security researchers or incident responders, is going to be with me at about 10 a.m. I'm going to schedule the stream right after this. We're going to go live. We're going to cover some of the things that we talked about here today, run some of the tools to make sure that we're getting this information out again, and cover some of the things that he's done and some of the investigation steps that he's gone through with customers. And then a little bit later in the day, I believe I think it's 11 a.m. Eastern time, we have a bigger webinar with Matt Radulak, who's our Director of Incident Response. If you're Varonis customers, you may have talked to Matt. Incredibly awesome guy. He's very, very good at this, and he's going to walk us through, again, a much broader scope of kind of some of the things that we're seeing out there. So that's going to be great, and we want to put out all those resources to everybody. So tomorrow, again, we're gonna cover a little bit more in the morning, and then, like I said, a bigger customer-focused event if you're a Varonis customer prospect.
Cool. And I think that's all that we have today. Also, to the person pasting by basic biographical data that was copied and pasted from one of those things where you copy and paste someone's name in, why would I care? Oh my God, you saved your, that's a 5-second Google search. Spend your time doing something else. All right, that's all we have for today. I guess if you have any other great questions we didn't get a chance to answer, please post them in the YouTube channel. That's SecurityFWD. You can also find it on hackingwithfriends.com. And on Wednesdays, we will get around to answering them. So you can either show up on Wednesdays or you can check in on the recording later to see if we answered your question. That's all we got today. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks so much.